Hello, Mr. Thank you for your briefing. You said the UN does not have an arbitration role, but back in Cyprus in an interview we had, you had told me that in the security and guarantees chapter you had a different role where some arbitration was also included. So is the UN now arbitrating the guarantees and security chapter? Is it doing some kind of a shuttle diplomacy between the guarantor powers and the sides? What is exactly your role right now in that specific topic?
Thank you for asking, because we are not in the business of arbitrating even this chapter, and we will not be. However, because this involves several players, and not only the two sides in Cyprus, it has a somewhat different nature, and that's why I spent much of my own time in travels and discussions with Turkey, Greece, and the UK over the last weeks in order to ensure that our preparations are as best as they can for the 12th. And there is still work to do, by the way, on this front. So shuttle diplomacy, absolutely. Arbitration, no.
The lady here? Yes, the second one.
Yes, can you be more specific about the EU role at the conference? You said it will be an observer. What does this mean? What, practically, so, I mean.
The participants of the conference are, of course, the Cypriots, Anastasiadis and Akinci, and the guarantor powers, Turkey, Greece, and the UK. Those are the participants. But then we agree that because the EU is an interested party, since the United Cyprus will be a member of the European Union, and the European Union has a role to play and is also being constructively engaged throughout. They will be present and helpful, of course now on a much higher level, but in principle, as they have been throughout the process, through their representation in Cyprus. So when we need advice, inputs, we invite the EU in, which does not mean that they are in a decision-making role, but they are in a supportive role. And although we're now talking of a different level of participation, in principle the same thing, and that's why they have a particular role to play.
Can you introduce yourself, please, at the beginning?
I'm Rasul Reshat from Kıbrıs Postası. Can you share any information about the level of participation on the 12th from the guarantor powers? Or are there any signals of who's going to participate from where?
As of right now, so there are conversations between us and the guarantor powers, and between the guarantor powers among them about this issue. They will be represented here at the highest or the second highest level, and that decision is still to be finally made. And of course, they will also look to each other when they make their decision. But I want to use your question to reiterate an important point. All of them, and particularly Turkey and Greece, are both almost in unison saying we're also watching what's happening between the 9th and the 11th. Because we are actually interested in, if we come, we want to know that all or most of the other issues are behind us or in the way to a final settlement, because they are not interested in being party to discussions that should and will be left to the Cypriots. So there is a relationship between these two things, but the concrete answer is the highest or the second highest level available.
John Zarokostas. Use yourself, John.
Yes, good afternoon, John Zarokostas with France 24. I was wondering, sir, if you could elaborate, what are your views on the Treaty of Alliance, and if it's a dead letter or still valid? Thank you.
Could you just raise your hand? There you are. If the Treaty Alliance is dead letter or not, that was the question.
Is it still alive, or is it a dead letter? Thank you.
Well, I mean, legally speaking, these treaties are there, right? So they are, and if you want to change, they have to be changed by those who signed them in the first place. But so in that sense, it's not a dead letter. But the ambition here is to develop a 21st century security arrangement, which will, and here I can't say much more than saying, which will have to cater to the security concerns of both communities without, by doing so, creating a security concern for the other side. And this is what many of the discussions are now about. And this issue in Cyprus, of course, also have to be reconciled with sort of the broader policies of the neighboring states. And my hope as the Special Advisor on Cyprus is that we will have our primary attention on the interests and the needs of the Cypriots in Cyprus, and that other players will see that as the key to how we find a solution to also this question.
The gentleman with the blue jacket.
Hi, thank you, Mr. Éïnde, for coming and talking to us. Stefanos Evrividou, Cyprus Mail. You said earlier that the quality of the January the 12th meeting will very much depend on the January 9 to 11 discussions, but at the same time the January 9 to 11 discussions will depend on the expectations of the 12th. So how do you square that circle without a time machine? Is there some kind of parallel negotiations taking place also on the international aspects of an agreement?
There are I would not use the word negotiations, because I think they will only happen here in a more formal sense of the word. But there are daily exchanges between the key players and also between the Secretary General. And I want to underline that Secretary General Guterres, who is now on his ninth day at work, has now been engaged almost daily. I've been speaking to him every day over the last days, and he has, much more importantly, been speaking to the key players, in addition to the Cypriot leaders, but also the guarantor players. So there is a lot of activity going on, but something that can be referred to as negotiations, I think we'll only see here on the 12th onwards. And again, to the question of level of participation, the level on the first day is not necessarily the level on the last day, because it's relatively common that you start at a certain level and then you calibrate what happens later. So I wouldn't take the 12th, whatever happens on the 12th, as the final answer to that question. Normally, just general reference, very few negotiations start at the highest possible level. You normally start at the lower level and you escalate to the top when something is either ready to be signed or where some kind of final top-level agreement has to happen.
Jamie.
Hi, sir. Jamie Keaton from Associated Press. If you could, you mentioned that there were a number of chapters that still have points that need to be addressed. I was hoping that you might be able to address particularly the subject that was discussed, the subjects that were discussed this morning, and whether or not there was progress made in that arena. I'm particularly thinking about, if you think that it's feasible that there can be an agreement on how many people can reclaim property that leaves both sides satisfied, and if progress is not made, could that jeopardize the visit of Mr. Erdogan, Mr. Tsipras, and Ms. May, possibly later this week? Thank you.
Well, as you correctly said, this morning, the main topic this morning was property. It's a large and complicated chapter where there has been for almost a year there's been a broad outline of an agreement. So the general principles of an agreement has been known for a long time. But we have been, to be frank, we've been stuck on some issues which are large and small, depending on how you see them, and particularly, and this is well known to the Cypriots in the room, the issue of how to define the concept of emotional link, and a couple of other issues, which I would not say is detailed, but we are inside a broader understanding which was established quickly. We need to solve these issues. And I don't think it's possible to see a solution in Cyprus without a solution to these issues. So we're going to work hard and we will come back to it. It was a good start today. We had a good conversation. But the leaders decided to set up a small working group to we'll be meeting now, basically, in the lunch break, and to try to solve some issues that they posed with the ambition to find mutually agreeable outcomes that would create the level of certainty for those who need certainty, and the space for further development for those who need that. Yep.
Okay, a couple of more questions. Nina, AFP. Yeah. Let's see.
Hi, Nina Larson, AFP. So also on the issue of the chapters, you say there are issues remaining in all the different chapters. Are there any specific chapters where you think you're particularly close to closing them? And could you say what the sides are planning to discuss? They're coming back. Sorry. I think they're coming back later this evening to talk. So could you tell us what they're planning on discussing at that point? Thank you.
Oops. Yeah. So they have had their first round on property, as I mentioned, and this working group is working and will come back when they're ready. I mean, we're talking in the coming hours and days. I mean, it's not in the long run. It's coming working days. They started on governance, where much is solved, but at least one major issue is outstanding. There will be a brainstorming this afternoon on security and guarantees, but in a brainstorming format in order to prepare for the 12th, because I want a little bit more clarity on the leaders on what signals the Secretary General and I shall send to other relevant players. Then they will go back to governance, which is a large chapter. You mentioned which are the chapters where we are close. I would say tomorrow we have economy and EU, and there... What's that? Oh, it wasn't me.
No, please don't shout like this in the room. If there's a problem, come and see us. It was just, I think, a problem with the... Please, sir, continue.
I will go back a second. There was a question here from AFP whether there are some issues we are close. Well, we're generally relatively close. In the number of issues, there are not many. But the point is some of them are relatively large, so it's difficult to measure one to another. But I think in the issues of economy and EU, there isn't really anything very dramatic left to be done. And then we will also have a discussion on implementation. And I want to underline the importance of implementation. One thing is, in one sense, we're working on two levels. One is the political agreement. But we are also, in parallel to that, started the work on what do we in practice do to put it into practice. So there's also an implementation discussion which is very important, and that's a number of issues. And then on Wednesday we will have territory. We will then come back to property, and then what we call leftovers, but the issues that we then have to group for the end. I can say the leaders agreed yesterday on a schedule, and we are so far, but it's early days, but so early hours, but so far we're on schedule.
Okay, I have the gentleman there, and then you. Please go ahead.
Yes, Mete Tümerkan from Havadis Daily, Cyprus. I would like to ask you, would you please tell us, considering the period before Montpellier and now, about the number of the convergences? Have the leaders managed to reach more convergences in this period or not? Are the number of the convergences are still the same as it was before Montpellier?
In my view, there were a number of new convergences on issues like policing and other aspects of internal security, not to be confused with the international security and guarantee. We had progress on the implementation discussion, and we had the progress on the economy chapter, so at least. So there has been some. We could have hoped for even more. I agree with that. But there has been a drive forward to this meeting. And I also want to say, I said at the beginning, there are simply certain issues that you could be walking around in circle for another half year. You will not solve them before you're in this kind of environment. And this is based on experience from other places. Sometimes you need a clock to tick in order to know that this later suddenly became now. And when you realize that later is now, then suddenly certain dynamics come out of that. And I think my role as a facilitator, not a mediator, but a facilitator, is to try to structure the discussion such that we get the necessary energy and the necessary, let's say, the process right in order to capture that momentum, which is right now.
Yes, Maros Kemnerides, Hellenic TV, London. If, for unforeseen circumstances, the talks do not deliver, which we will expect they will, what is the next step? Will the international conference go ahead? And what will be the grounds for the international conference to go ahead? Because if there is no talks to negotiate, then what will the international conference go ahead for? And the second question, the three guarantor powers are guarantors of the Republic of Cyprus. Has the Republic of Cyprus officially been invited to attend the conference?
On the question of what happens on the 12th, if we have no progress, not everything breaks down. I don't think that's going to happen. That is not my sense. Quite on the contrary, I've come out of a meeting that suggests that we are moving forward in the right direction. And it's not really an either-or, because the security and guarantees chapter has to be opened. What I was saying is not that, as I said, it's not whether we will have a conference on the 12th, it's the quality of the conference. How much can we get done depends on how well the two leaders and I do in these talks so far. On your second question, I'll just make reference to the fact that it was Mr. Anastasiadis and Mr. Akinci who decided to hold these meetings. They are here, as they are here, and they are they are the sides, the parties to this conference, and there are alternative interpretation of what that means, but we know exactly who they are and we know exactly what they mean, and we do not invite ourselves. I have not been invited either. Anastasiadis and Mr. Akinci decided together with me to hold the conference, so we of course invite other people, just like when you and your wife or whatever have an invite to a dinner, you don't invite yourself. I assume. Yeah.
We have a question from our host country, Laurent Etias.
Yes, Laurent Siro, Swiss News Agency. Concerning the guarantor powers, sorry, would you say that you can feel a political will from their perspective like never before in order to sustain what might be an agreement?
Yes, but sorry, whom? Yeah, I saw that, but please repeat the question. Yeah.
Sure. Concerning the guarantor powers.
Would you
say that you can feel a political will from their perspective like never before in order to sustain what might be an outcome and an agreement here?
I actually dare to say yes to that question. I feel a strong will, and they convey to the Secretary General, to me, to each other, that they would very much like to see this solved. But I have to add to that answer that that is not the same as agreeing on what the answer is. So yes, what I've been told, both in Athens and Ankara and London, which probably is less surprising, so let me focus on Ankara and Athens, is that they've been quite frank, saying that for the Cypriots, for me, Cyprus is about Cyprus, as it should be. For them, there are many other political open issues that they have to remember, but that a solution in Cyprus will figure positively on all of those. This is the view I hear in Ankara, it's the view I hear in Athens, that a settlement would improve a number of other dynamics, in addition to being good for the Cypriots. Seen from Cyprus, of course, it's the other way around, but it doesn't matter if what is good for Cyprus even can be helpful for broader regional dynamics. I would like to, for those of you not from Cyprus, remind that we're talking about a European country in the extreme end of the Eastern Mediterranean, just a little bit more than 100 kilometers from Syria, and very close to the whole Levant and the whole drama going on there. And despite of Cyprus having a Cyprus problem for half a century, it has been relatively unaffected by the regional drama, which almost engulfs almost everybody else. And I have said since I started that you cannot take for granted that frozen conflicts remain frozen forever if you don't try to deal with them when you can. So I believe that there is this whole process, these last 19 months, including the coming days and maybe weeks, is a moment of opportunity that it would be very unwise to miss. Because I don't know, you don't know, nobody knows what will happen next, but it's not necessarily a good thing. Yes.
The gentleman there, just the last question.
Stéphane Bissard, Le Temps. You were talking about a 21st century security infrastructure for what should be proposed here during the talks. How would you value actually a proposal made by the Greek foreign minister about creating an international police under Chapter 7? Thank you.
On the specifics of that, I think I should not say too much now, because we will first have these negotiations and then I can speak about it. But what I want to say is that there is a proposal which has also come from the Greek foreign minister of thinking in the direction of a pact of friendship And while this is not something that in any way has been agreed or negotiated, there's been sort of interest in thinking about new concepts and new frameworks for whatever arrangements that comes out. But that's all I can say about that at this point. All these issues are, well, they're not on the table, but they will be on the table when we are here, and I know it's being prepared, and conversations are going on, trying to prepare that. You did not ask, but some people ask me, wouldn't you want to have sort of more of a concept ready before a conference like the one we're having on the 12th? It's normally yes, but in this particular circumstance, it seems that was, why that would be ideal, it wasn't really possible, because you will only trigger these dynamics which may lead to opening of old positions when, A, the Cypriots have done, if I may say so, the homework on what is sort of Cyprus-specific, and when the climate has been created where the leadership of these other countries are ready to engage. So this is the dynamic that we are hoping to create. If we make it on the 12th, it will be fantastic, but we are not worried if it takes more time to develop this, but we have to get started. Okay, last one.
Okay, let's take the very, very last one. Sorry.
On the basis of the...
Introduce yourself.
Yeah, Nicolas Zanetos from Alpha TV Cyprus. On the basis of the agreement of the 1st of December, the two sides will need to exchange maps in the 11th. What will happen with those maps? Will they have the opportunity to see each side's maps, and what will you eventually do with them?
I will definitely take good care of them. Let me just say there is an agreed modality for that in high level of detail, how we do exactly that. But I am actually not, to be frank, I'm actually not certain what the leaders want me to say about how we do that. So I'm not going to say much more, that it will happen, and it's an important part, and it will happen on the 11th.
Thank you very, very much, Mr.
Stella, because she's...
Oh, okay, that's fine. If you're happy, I'm happy. Please.
Stella Mikhail from Suga IPC Cyprus. If we have...
Silence, please. Can we let her speak?
If you will be able to reach a breakthrough the next days here in Geneva, do you have also the answers for the financing this solution? Are you ready for this? It was one of the very difficult topics you had to face.
Well, we have both the World Bank and the IMF is here present with us, and there's been a lot of work done on the financing of the settlement, including the property financing, and it's part of the whole picture. So a lot of work has been done, which is positive. Of course, we haven't done it. We haven't a done deal, because you can actually release money for something that hasn't happened. So there's a natural dynamic between the breakthrough and actually, filling up a fund. But a lot of preparations have been made, and there's a lot of good concepts out there, and there are key players who are expressed strong will to contribute.
Are reachable?
Is it reachable? Yes, I think so.
Okay. Thank you so very much, Mr. Éïnde, and thank you very much, everybody. Good afternoon.